Welcome to the Writer's Game Podcast, where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. And now, let's get into the show.
Welcome to another episode of the Writer's Game Podcast, where we help you monetize your message and magnify your voice. My name is Kyle King. I'm going to be your host, and we have somebody on here that is super special to me, somebody that I'm connected with, I would say a friend, and somebody on here that has such a powerful, transformational, and a story that can shift people's lives. Somebody out here that is inspiring people in their community, and like I like to call it, putting the leaders in office so that we can make this world, this community, and everything that we're doing better. So Collins, how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing good, brother. Hey, listen, thank you so much for having me today.
For sure. So before we get into the weeds of all of the strategies that I'm sure you don't want to share, but you're already recording and it's already live, could you introduce yourself? Tell us how you're impacting the world and how you're using your story to change lives.
Sure. So my name is Collins Pettaway III. I am a communications specialist, which specializes in political strategies, as well as public relations, crisis communications management, as well as digital media management, something recently I started doing during the pandemic, when the pandemic first kicked off. I'm born and raised in Selma, Alabama. I am a two-time graduate from Alabama A&M University. Go Bulldogs. And just a little bit about myself. I started essentially getting into this business to essentially help people. I always wanted to be able to sort of help other people, and I always had this thirst for politics. And so one of the things that I always just realized was that there was a spirit and this wave of empowerment that people had, but not enough education. And so if I can be able to do my contributions into helping to prepare the next generation of leaders, essentially to be able to go to the next level, and then that definitely brings a wave of fulfillment toward myself. Although I must say people have been pushing me to run for public office myself, which I might do probably soon. I don't know. I'm tired of running from it. But at this day right now, my focus is definitely focusing on making kings and queens versus being the king.
I love what you said about there's a lot of empowerment, but
Yes.
a lack there of education. Could you talk to us a little bit about what that means?
Absolutely. So we're seeing now, especially in this wave, I think we're even seeing it more when it comes to COVID. It's something that I learned. I'm going to try to keep this really, really short because it's a pretty bulky statement I'm about to make. But in graduate school, we learned this concept, what was called Web 2.0. And in Web 2.0, what it did was it took the things that we see as legacy media, which were television, newspapers, magazines, those accredited sources of producers, and it essentially made us the producers through blogs, podcasts, Twitter, social media, anything of that nature. And so now, instead of us being the consumers and the newscasters, the meteorologists, the doctors, those persons who we used to see on television being the producers, those roles have now switched. And so because now anybody can be a producer, there's all of this information that's coming from every which way. You can literally go to Google and type one thing in, and so much can come up about it. And so the problem that we have with that is that we don't know if all of this information is factual, it's become credible, and we have grown into a society where we tend to lean on something that makes us feel good. And so because of the direction that we're in, people are feeling empowered to speak out more. They're feeling empowered to want to step out there more. They want to express themselves, express their opinions. All of that is fine because we need that. But I want to just make sure that if you're going to step out there more, it's so important that you are able to at least be stepping in the right direction, or at least know why you're doing what you're doing, and also know that history has shown that you're not the first person to do something like this. And so if history shows you that you're not the first person to do it, let's learn why it was done in the first place, because that way you're able to keep from repeating history. That old statement that we learned, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, is so true. And sometimes we're watching it play out even more than what we realize.
Mm. When you think about that statement of just talking about the construct of history, right?
Yeah.
If there was one thing that you could go back in history and change, and you could shift one thing, what would you want to shift?
That's actually a really good question. Just thinking about this on the fly. So there was this compromise that took place back in history called the Three-Fifths Compromise. And the Three-Fifths Compromise is it was a law policy, a US American policy that counted Black people as 3/5 of a person. And so because you were 3/5 of a person, if you were privileged to have the right to vote, your vote it was only 3/5 of a vote. If you participated in the census, you were counted as 3/5 of a person, essentially. And so population count obviously, was different. And so for me, outside of everything that we went through, besides there was slavery, we had so much that we dealt with over the years. But I really truly believe, and this is also because I served with the U.S. Commerce for some years, a couple of years back. And so I truly believe that if we were able to do away with the Three-Fifths Compromise, when we were able to gain citizenship, be able to vote, I really think we would see a wave of more people of color in leadership positions. We probably would have had the first Black president well before 2008. Because I think it would have put something in your mind that your voice and your vote still does matter, because we're still having to prove that now for something that took place well over 200 years ago.
Do you believe that voices and everybody's voice matters?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Why? Why do you believe that?
Well, I guess that sort of kind of is almost a segue into maybe my personal story almost, because that was something that I had to actually deal with, that I had to really understand for a long time, because there was a point where I didn't think my voice actually mattered. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure what my dreams looked like. And it sort of kind of forced me to really kind of look inside myself to really sort of understand what was it about my voice that was so important. And that sort of kind of brought me into wanting to tell my story a little bit before I became the person that I am today.
Could you walk me through what was the time, what was the experience that sparked in your mind or sparked in your life that I need to tell my story? I don't feel like my voice matters. I do need to tell my story. There's a gap in the middle. What went on in your mind? What was the journey going on in your head? What was the feeling within your heart that sparked you to now it's time to begin sharing and telling my story?
Honestly, it wasn't necessarily a feeling, but it was more so of a situation, essentially. I grew up in, I guess you would say, almost the perfect household, almost, 2-parent home. Both parents are college educated with great jobs, prominent careers, well known in the community. Obviously, being the child of those parents, there's also some notoriety that comes with that. There are also expectations that essentially, that come with that, and so obviously for a long time, even through undergrad, when I was at A&M the first time, it was more so about me trying to get things done because of who my family is. And because, there's no excuse. I've got to get this done. It was never because of what I wanted to do or what I thought about doing. Literally, I pushed through making the bare minimum of trying to get things done or do things because that was just simply the thing to do, because that was honestly what what came through my family. And so it really wasn't until it was actually later on. My father and I had a conversation. It was shortly after I graduated from with my first degree. And my father felt that I needed to move back home after I finished my first degree. And I disagreed with that. I said, well, no, I want to stay in I want to stay here in Huntsville. I want to get a job. And I felt like, I wanted to try to, I still had some things I had to do. And he made the statement that, you're not going to do as well, until you come home, because there's a lot of things you don't know. Of course, obviously, I'm 21 years old. And so looking back on that, me as 32, I would have probably taken that and said, okay, you know what? I see what you're saying. Let's look into how we can, but of course, 21-year-old me was prideful, honestly, and stupid. And so I took that as, oh, you're trying to just say, I need you. Like, I'm not, I don't need you as a crutch. And so, I lived a lot of years through pride. And I think a lot of that sort of kind of put me in some very, very tough situations, to where eventually I hit a rock bottom point. And then after I hit a rock bottom point, I kind of sat there and I was just asking myself, I can get out of this situation because I'm blessed to be able to do that. But once I get out of the situation, what is it that I want to do, or what is it can I do? And I literally kept asking myself, what can I contribute to society? What do I want to do? And because for years I was shaped to follow in a standard and follow in a pattern of things that are somewhat perfect, to sort of hide the imperfections that I had going on in my family, to sort of hide some of the things that I dealt with growing up in my household, looking back, realizing that, hey, this is not really normal. You don't really talk to, family should not be talking to each other like this. It's almost shocking almost sometimes when I recount specifically about the stories, but that moment, I never forget it. It was September 25th, 2015. And I literally I fell to rock bottom. I did not know what to do. And I had no choice but to literally it wasn't more so about facing anybody else, not facing my parents, not facing my family, but it was just more so about facing me and facing myself, and say, okay, Collins, what do you want to do? What are you going to do? And it was not, what are you going to do to fix this, but what are you going to do to move yourself forward? And at that point, I had to sit down. And when I felt like, okay, I cannot deal with this anymore, I cannot be in the circle, I made a plan. And then I started writing down just all of these ideas. I just started writing down just random words. Okay, what do you want to do? What do you like to do? And some way, somehow, the only thing I kept thinking about was, well, I still have more to learn. And that's all I kept saying. I still had more to learn, which is what sparked me to go to graduate school. In graduate school was where I found the thirst of learning more, not necessarily about politics, but how to be able to shape politics into the career that I want, which brought me into the space and the realization to say, hey, I guess I do need to go back home. And I ended up coming back home, where I had to face the very things that I ran away from.
I think so many times, Collins, and I think what you're saying is so powerful. There are so many people that are currently experiencing a breaking, but haven't gotten to their breaking point. So they're currently breaking, but they haven't gotten to that breaking point. But I believe once we get to the breaking point, two things happen. We have a realization, and then after the realization, we become humbled from the realization before the realization, in a sense. Right. Because so many times when we're breaking, we go to ego, we go to pride, we believe that we have it all figured out, we believe that we have the answers, we believe in our confidence, but we lack the necessary preparation. We lack the necessary wisdom. We lack the necessary foresight. So I love what you're saying is, when you got to this breaking point, you then picked up the pen of your own story, humbled yourself, and you began to become the author of your own journey.
And can I say this too, to that? There's this notion that, they say, if you don't succeed, try again, or once you are able to move forward and move up and to do X, Y, and Z, then you can just, start writing and start doing these things, which is honestly a misnomer. It was still hard. It was still a challenge. The moment that I stepped out and realized I cannot be the judge's son, I cannot be this person's son, I have to be Collins in this journey, it became super hard for me to really figure it out. But I can say, if you stick with it long enough, and if you stay committed to understanding your story, you find your purpose in your story. That was a lesson to me, honestly.
When you think about that lesson, though, and you think about somebody that is currently experiencing what you've already gotten through,
right?
What was your step-by-step process of getting through to where you are now? What would you recommend them do as they're listening, as they're like, Collins, I feel you, Collins, that's my life right now. What would you tell that person right now?
Well, first of all, I would definitely, the first step you mentioned earlier is just coming to the realization that enough is enough. And just being honest, there are going to be some moments you might have to repeat that first step. You might tell yourself enough is enough, and then you want to change, but you might find yourself back in that same pattern, and then you'll come back again. Dog, I've been here before. I can't do this again. Enough is enough. So you just might repeat that first step a lot. And so it happens. It's natural. But at some point, you have to stand up and just literally tell yourself, this is enough. Like, you have to reach that turning point to say, I cannot do this anymore. And then once you reach that, the next step is figuring out what is the this that you are that is hurting you. What is that toxic point? What is that point of, well, I cannot do this? And once you actually reach that, once you figure that out, you can literally start, okay, if this path does not work, what is this path? What is your path? Figure out what your new path is. And if you're a writer, and then you have to do that based off your personality. For me, I have to write everything down. Even if I don't have anything, I will literally just pull out a blank sheet of paper and start writing. Some people are visual learners. Some people are verbal. They just have to start talking and start speaking. But what I had to do was sort of try to figure out, okay, now that we've honed in on what does not work, I need to try to find out, where can I go from here? And for me, this is just me talking. I chose therapy to propel me into what my next step was, because I did not know what the next step looked like for me. I literally had to use, I chose therapy because that was, and it was unspoken, it was unheard of. Believe it or not, this is my second time mentioning publicly about me actually going to therapy. My first time was on my own podcast that I premiered last year. We did an episode about mental health, and that was my first time publicly just acknowledging that, yes, I've been going to therapy for the last 4 years now, and it's really made a change. But once you're able to figure out what direction that you're able to go into, then that should be clear for you to actually start moving into that right direction. And once you've reached the point to where you say, okay, this is it, you can now begin to rewrite your legacy, and you can now begin to rewrite your story to help somebody else. And then so they can be able to not necessarily make the same mistakes you have, but if they did make the same mistakes that you made, there's still a blueprint out there of how they can push forward, push past that. And so if you're somebody that may not believe in therapy, then I definitely recommend a village or someone, whatever religion that you believe in. I believe in God and Jesus Christ. I prayed. Just, you have to depend on something. Facing yourself and really dealing with a lot of things that you ran away from regarding yourself, to me, it caused me to realize that I could not do this alone, that I need someone else. So although you're facing it yourself, you don't have to be by yourself.
Exactly. Anybody listening right now, number one, once you have that realization, you need to identify the thing that's missing in your life, that gap that's causing a lot of the triggers, that's causing a lot of the discomfort, that's causing a lot of the uncomfortability. And once you understand that, you need to commit to the activity. You need to commit to the thing that's going to progress you forward. Once you've committed to the activity, or once you've even identified the necessary steps that will take place to you developing, to you transforming, then the next step is to create or join an environment, whether that's as a part of a religious community, whether that is friendships, whether that is therapy, whether that is anything that will help you have the necessary support system. Just like Colin said, you can't do this alone. When you're facing the demon, when you're facing the enemy, when you're facing yourself, sometimes in the mirror, that person sometimes has preparation that you are not equipped to go into battle alone with. So you have to have all of these different things that serve as the weapons, that serve as the swords, that serve as the armor, so that you could be able to advance in your life. So Collins, when you have this realization, now you've gotten to a point where you've recognized who you are, you've recognized your story, you've recognized your expectations and your vision and your dreams. And now you're not a product of the past, but you're you're planting the seeds for your future. What is one thing that you believe that you're working on currently that inspires you?
Believe it or not, it's actually not just one. I just mentioned it earlier. I started a podcast last year called The Black Constitution. It's the motto of it is where politics resides with pop culture vibes, essentially, because it gives I deal with a lot of things that you hear about on political spectrums, but I also cover a lot of major topics. Like I said, mental health was one. We're getting ready to start our new season on there. Got a lot of major topics. Shout out, I think got you coming on this season, so I'm definitely excited about that. My next biggest project that I'm actually working on, well, I worked on essentially, that I'm looking to try to get finished, is I felt led to write a book. And initially I wrote the book to sort of kind of tell my story a little bit about my upbringing, to really sort of try to find the lessons out of that. And I know that was one of the things that I thoroughly appreciated with you, because we were able to sort of point out the lessons throughout that story, to be able to tell that story for someone else can hear it. And so it's actually quite a few things I'm really wanting to do regarding my legacy. And that, that's not it. I'm working on a research, an academic research project, possibly working on to try to be able to get published there. I've got some merchandise I'm working on as well. And so I have a lot, believe it or not, of things that I wanted to do. And one of the biggest breakthroughs that I had to fight through, that it took me almost 7 years to really understand, was that I had to stop thinking about, I can't do this or this or this or this. And to really say, it's not about if you can do this or this or this, but to turn those or blessings into some and blessings. I can do whatever the hell it is I want to do, however the way I want to do it. And that's literally the space that I have started to walk into last year, especially going into 2020, that you are capable of doing whatever you want to do. It's not about this or that, but it's this and that and more.
I love that. So many times we have a lot of different pots on the burners. We have a lot of different cards on the table. We have a lot of different ideas within our minds. If you could only accomplish one thing in life, and you were remembered for that one accomplishment, what would you want that one accomplishment to be?
Most certainly, my writing. Definitely my writing, because my writing tells my story. It records who I am. And then I think you've got books in your background. Although this is a virtual background, I actually do have a lot of books with me. The one thing that I think you and I know when it comes to books, newspapers, magazines, articles, is that these writings are preserved forever. We're still reading about uh, literature, and we're still reading books and publications from authors over 200 and 300 years ago, almost a millennia ago. And so for me, it's definitely going to be my writing in all of its facets, because that's the legacy that I want to literally leave when I'm dead and gone.
Define legacy.
Define legacy? Ooh, legacy is the statement that you leave behind for someone else. And legacy can be good or it can be bad. So I won't even say if good or bad. I would just simply say the statement that you leave behind for someone else. And it's up to you to determine what kind of statement that you want to leave behind.
Define story.
The series of events that you go through, or that you may have recorded or seen someone go through, and it being recounted for someone else to either see or read.
Define author.
The person who pens those series of events, whether it be yours, theirs, anyone else's, but that person who has to accurately pen those events.
How have you become better with the realization that you are the author of your story and you started to tell it more?
There is a sense of self-security that I did not have, where I don't necessarily question my motives anymore. There are moments and place situations to where I get people have if I may say something I want to do, or if I may bring something up, and someone might question me and say, well, are you sure you want to do that? Or I don't know about that. And then I find myself maybe stepping back and say, well, I don't know. What do you think? There's now a sense of self-security. If, even if they don't agree, it's, well, I'm sorry, I'm still going to move forward with this, because this is something I know I wanted to do. Literally something as recent as deciding to walk away from my full-time job so that I can actually focus on my aspirations and my goals, and sharing that with my family, because I know this is what I want to do and it's the right thing to do. Obviously, your village is always concerned for you. They want the best for you. Are you sure this is what you want to do? I just hate for you to have to leave something stable. And, I had to remind you, well, I promise you, my dream is stable. And so because my dream is stable, this is going to remain stable.
I love that. Our dreams are stable even when we're not stable. I believe that our calling is still stable when our circumstance seems with a lack of grounding. When our circumstances seems to be in gravel, our calling still always has a strong foundation. If you could look at that person that you once were when you were going through a season of transformation, going through a season of doubt, going through a season of not feeling like your story mattered, going through a season of pride. If you could speak to that person right now, what would you say to that person in 60 seconds?
It's okay. I know you're scared because you don't know what your parents are going to think of you it's okay. And I know that you are afraid to step out there on your own, but you are allowed to tell people no. You are allowed to be the person who you have always wanted to be since you were little. You are allowed to do the things that you want to do. And you do have time to make those decisions that you want to make. Have no regrets about the mistakes that you have made. Do not beat yourself up because of the mistakes that you have made. Your parents are only doing because that's the environment that they were taught in. But you know better. And because you know better, you are able to be better, and it's okay. So forgive yourself. Please forgive yourself because it's okay.
It's okay, people. Anybody listening right now, we want you to forgive yourself. We want you to understand the importance of your story. We want you to start telling your story. We want you to start saying no. We want you to stop operating from a sense of pride, and we want you to start getting prepared. Because the goal is not perfection, the goal is progress in any situation that you're in. No matter your circumstance, your calling is intact. Your dream is intact. Your vision is intact. If you could just continue to imagine and visualize a life better than where you currently are. Collins, where can we find you?
You can find me here. You can find me at collinsp3.com. That's my website is a one-stop shop. You'll find information regarding everything that I'm doing here, not just in Selma, but in the Black Belt area. There, it'll take you to information regarding my consultation firm, the Pettaway firm, which we just recently launched our standalone website. You'll find information related to my podcast, to my blog, as well as contact information as well. If you need to get in contact with me for any speaking engagements, to book me for anything you would like to do, you can also find me there at collinsp3.com, or you can just contact me directly at collinspettaway3@gmail.com. That's Collins Pettaway, the number 3 @gmail.com.
Collins, it's always been a pleasure. We appreciate you for allowing us to hear your story and you sharing your story willingly. We are on the Writer's Game podcast, where we help you magnify your voice and monetize your message. I am your host, Kyle King, and we'll see you guys next episode.